right? So that they presume that the context is that it's really difficult for the state to bail out when the large bank is going to fail. So what this implies is that there's a limitation of the capability of the state to invest in the large investment, for example, development or supporting the other economically failing country, companies, etc. Right? So we think that in that kind of context, large banks play a very important, unique role to invest a project or invest a development that requires a lot of money, right? For example, the investment of the development on the developing nation, or like building like infrastructure, or expanding, or like the revitalizing the economy of the failing like cities, or etc. Or maybe, for example, when it comes to the like failing countries such as Greece, those countries are like actually like supported or invested by many like large banks, foreign like large banks. And we think this actually very important, play a very important role to stabilize the lives of the students in Greece.
Given the nature of too big to fail corporations are going to be bailed out even though they fail. Do you think that is the reason why the too big banks are going to do the reckless behavior that is going to economic crisis?
Okay. We think that this what this implies is that the actually they presume that those large banks are going to fail because they actually underestimate the risk, etc. We think that given the current context, where the already like large corporations such as Lehman Brothers or Toshiba or those kind of things are already failing, we think it's unlikely that the large corporate management of large corporations are going to do the similar thing. This kind of in the current context, the sensitivity towards the failure is currently increasing, and especially facing a recession, we think it's unlikely that those kind of managers are so optimistic. We think that even though they may affirm the a collective investment by the multiple or middle or small bank, it's irreparably likely to happen, right? Because firstly, the management strategy of each bank is different, right? And we think it's take that huge time to make the consensus in regards to the condition of the large investment or the amount of money which are going to invest in. So we think that having a large bank is better. But secondly, we think when it comes to a small bank, as I already told you, that small bank have to be extra sensitive towards the risk. So we think in that circumstances, those kind of risks that can be halted by a large bank is exclusively important. We think large bank plays a really important role to support this large investment.
We will now let us break down the number of comments to show you takes within 7 minutes to come up with a page.
Thank you, Chair. As a closing government, we will prove to you how the status of too big to fail makes the management reckless, and actually that is the cause of the economic depression and why it's really destructive at the very, that's a really important contribution from the closing government. So two things from the member of the government. Firstly, exactly the same, how the status of too big to fail makes the management reckless, and secondly, why the small banks and specialized financial sectors are capable enough, and why it's more healthy compared with the kind of huge banks. But before two independent developers with opening opposition. Firstly, let me clarify about the bad condition of the economics. So there's two types, like the regression and depression, right? So when it comes to regression, for example, like a little decrease of the GDP, there's still kind of trust and there's still kind of healthy function of the market value sentiment. That's why the kind of trust is important. Argument coming from the opening opposition is not really important when it comes to that kind of ordinary regression we see in the reality. And when it comes to the depression, my partner already provides you the reason why there is kind of the market which is controlled by the fear, or the kind of on that kind of discount, stock prices will decrease 50% or something like that. In that kind of scenario, we say the cause is actually the failure of the financial sector. That's why we say it's the kind of discussion about the egg comes first or the chicken comes first. We say the failure of the financial sector comes first, and that's why it's particularly important to prevent that kind of circumstance, and we don't have to fear about the depression in their paradigm. So having clarified that. And then secondly, they say like the huge amount of the money is necessary. That's all right. Again, we don't see any importance, right? Because the multiple small the banks can cooperate to invest money to the huge corporation or the huge kind of development plan scheme, for example. We don't see any necessity within their side of the house. So let's move on to my first point. How the status of the too big to fail makes them really make reckless management. Firstly, because they are too big to fail, they obviously are confident in their kind of the stability, right? That's why we say they Yes, they don't. The management, for example, board of executives do not see the kind of clear possibility to fail, and that is exact reason why they believe we can take the risk, and they're durable, and that's why we need to maximize the current annual profit. That's a really kind of this mental the situation of the board of executive. And secondly, the government will anyway help us. That's why we don't necessarily care about that kind of possibility. So we told you that they think, that possibility to fail is really limited, and also even it happened, we can be helped. So why there is a necessity to prepare of the bankrupt? There is no necessity of doing so. That's why we say the moral hazard, that kind of the moral hazard can happen when they underestimate the risk and to be optimistic, right? And try to maximize the annual profit, despite the fact there is possibility of the kind of devastating end or the consequence. So that's the structure of the too big to fail the banks at the very beginning, right?
So the reason why Lehman Brothers run the extremely risky trade is because they wanted to win in the excessive competition between other small banks. Why is it different on your side of the house?
Alright, not true. It's the point is let me explain later. So yes, that's why in general the kind of the wasteful investment that can be prevented within our paradigm would be provided within the outside of house, because the management officer and also those people do not really care about the list, and they really try to taking the list. It's really devastating, because they spoil the money which is collected by the citizen, and it also has a significant damage on the society and also the citizen level at the very beginning. And also when it comes to the worst case scenario, that Lehman Brothers case is actually our example, right? Because they underestimate the possibility of the end of the bubble or the price of the real estate, right? Because there's still kind of research about the price, the bubble, the price of the real estate, but they underestimate that possibility. That is the reason why they continue the risky, the subprime loan, and although those kind of the poor cannot afford to repay that money, and also we cannot recollect the money even we the buy and sell that real estate. That exact scenario that we see because of the reckless management. We say it's really devastating within the outside of the house. Okay.
So after the invention of the government making the law which that guarantee the sustainability of the bank, for example, how much percentage of the internal reserve was the investment, even that without that incentive or that the owner, we can making the law or the restriction.
Because it can be the dark, because we don't see kind of we need to kind of preemptive action, right? Because the subprime loan was not so kind of the traditional financial the stock, the financial securities, right? So but it is developed, and it is created. That's why we need kind of the preemptive action to prevent that kind of situation. Law is just afterward, and it's not workable, right? So let's move on to the second point. So why the small banks and the specialized financial sectors are capable enough to replace the huge banks? So firstly, it's quite simple. We see like tons of alternatives. The small the banks and also the specialized financial sector, for example, the venture capital can take the risk in order to maximize their benefit. Why is it more healthy? Firstly, we see that kind of the clear consent to the risk management is really beneficial. They said our trust is important, but the point is that trust is really blind one, right? Because the vast majority of students do not really understand the kind of risky management of the huge bank, but they invest the money to that kind of huge banks. That's why we say there is no kind of clear check and balance between the investor and the management sector. That's why we say it is really devastating. When it comes to venture capital or those banks which try to take in the risk, we say because the investor do consent to that kind of management, and also do have the strong incentive to check that kind of the scheme. That's why we say it's more healthy. We can prevent the kind of wasteful investment in our side of the house. And secondly, also about the kind of diversity. So we believe where there's kind of multiple companies, that those kind of companies have tried to differentiate the policy from others in order to be appealing from the investors market. That's why we say the kind of diversity can be enjoy within outside the house. That's why we say we can enjoy the kind of risk hedge, right? Because even once the small banks are bankrupt, the vast majority do not bankrupt within outside the house. It's quite healthy. We are definitely proud to stand Croatian government.
Now let us welcome a member of opposition to showcase within 7 minutes. Would you come up to the stage?
Ladies and gentlemen, this debate is not only about consequences, but from opposition side, we have to talk about why we can use the tax revenue onto that kind of the big bank, right? This is never touched by opening opposition. That's the extension from the outside of the house. I want to talk about mainly two things. Firstly, I want to talk about justification for, as a government, why we can use tax revenue into that kind of policy, into a big very bank. Secondly, I will talk about why their harm provided by their side of the house can be mitigatable, and furthermore, there is a perfect counterproductive on the problem provided by them. But before moving to that, let's move on to a government image. First of all, I can't understand the reason why they're so very curious about the diversify a bank. Because too big to fail doesn't mean we have only one bank, right? Still, we have a tons of the diverse too big to fail company, right? Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, and Credit Suisse, and so forth, right? The diversity of the benefit of diversity is not mutually exclusive to begin with, right? No one rents the money onto the one big company, right? Some kind of, for example, McKinsey rents the money into the Goldman Sachs, but some kind of the Toyota rents the money from the Goldman Sachs and that kind of thing, which is called portfolio, right? No one rents the money into the one big company to begin with, right? That's why there's some kind of the benefit from the diversity doesn't stand in the first place. And furthermore, the opening government continuously talk about the economy is very unpredictable and uncontrollable, and Brexit had happened, or Zika fever and so forth, I can understand. But the reason why I can't understand that benefit is they didn't completely explain how they can achieve can solve the problem with the very, very small company on the other side of the house to begin with, right? That's why we think the opening government doesn't so crucial in this debate, right? So secondly, okay, and this other matters are the closing of government talk about because the big company have an incentive to differentiate and do risky management under their side. But this is our saying, right? As my partner clearly pointed out, because under their paradigm, there are tons of the small company. They have the incentive to enlarge their company and differentiate it and to do a risky company more on that razor. But we think that this kind of harm is very exacerbated under their paradigm. Rather, we think that we can stop that kind of things happening under our paradigm. So move to my first extension. Why we can justify what to do things. Two reasons is, firstly, we think that there is a the big bank is the basis or core part of over every kind of benefit which we are enjoying in this society, right? The benefit which you are enjoying in this society economically is created, and basis of that is created the big company, right? Many kind of the big company do, for example, advertently M&A and borrowing the money to the other person, the big company, and so forth, right? The reason why we are enjoying Toyota car and Google services is because the Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley provided money before the money to that company before they got the very the current status, right? Because the big company rents the money with their capacity, economical capacity, we can enjoy the benefit which we are enjoying, right? In that cases, we think it is natural for us to protect that kind of the very, very beneficial actor for the kind of things, right? We say the bank is the very, especially not same as the other company. Bank is particularly this kind of big bank is a contributor of society in the very, very basis part on our economical enjoyment. We think as a citizen, it is natural for us to pay money when that kind of company is dying. Secondly, we have to notice, as they said, economical problem is very, very unpredictable. Then we cannot push the root causes of that kind of problem into the bank, all kind of responsibility to the bank, right? There is tons of factor to cause a financial problem, right? Sometimes no one can cope with the very big economic crisis in that company, right? Even the two big company. And furthermore, one part of the cause sometimes will be assumed by citizens, right? Citizens sometimes recklessly lend some money, recklessly borrow the money, and they sometimes cause one part of the reason, cause of the problem or some kind of harm provided by their side of the house, right? No one can push the all responsibility and root causes of the problem onto the kind of banking, right? One part of the responsibility is already on the citizen. That's why we think, as a state, we have a justification for us to use the one part of the money of the citizen to save that kind of big company, right? We think that we already get the benefit from the bank, and we have the one part of the responsibility on the problem. We think it is natural to ask government to save that country to more stable, stable society for our society, right? And that is the justification which didn't touch the opening half, right? So move on to the next argumentation, right? We think even if their argument was true, still we think there is a perfect counterproductive about the problem, right? We think that if they have a very, very small diverse company, we think the competition will be exacerbated, right? But we think that kind of competition wants the very better consequences, right? Why? Because even, first of all, they don't have a monetary capacity to provide the very, very good services, right? So they cannot differentiate themselves by doing the very, very good and warm services. Then what they will do is doing the very high risk and creating the high risk commodity or deceive the citizen, right? Which we saw in the Lehman shock, right? The reason why Lehman shock had happened is not because the Lehman Brothers simply was big, right? But the reason why we had that problem is that company dramatically, suddenly grew unproportionately to their company, right? They were small and they are doing the very, very risky products, and they focus on the poor person, and the poor person recklessly rents the very mortgages from that company, and they unpredictably growth at that time, but they don't have a capacity and knowledge to cope with that problem. Then that kind of small company was fail, right? Because they try to differentiate themselves but from the other small company, they dramatically do some kind of growing and fail, right? These kind of things likely to happen under their problem more than that, right? Because we have to notice that kind of company have a less attention or less surveillance from the company, right? Because they are not so big, the investors or various government, they have less attention on that company. They likely to do those kind of things compared to big company, right? Because big company have to care about the reputation from the society, from the company, but the small company doesn't have those kind of incentive. We think these kind of things happen. And furthermore, we think the big company can cope with that problem. First of all, as the opening have already told you, they have a capacity and furthermore, because they are too big to fail company, the society of investor continuously check that kind of thing. That's the situation which is occurring in that company. They have incentive to very manages on that kind of situation in their company and appeal to that. We are fine, we are healthy, and this kind of things, right? And furthermore, society and we already as a human being learn the risk of that kind of things, right? Every single time we face the risk of the economic crisis, the media or tons of people claim and alarm that surely it is natural that all person, all citizen, and all bank have prepared to mitigate and minimize this kind of harm. That's why we think the big company can cope with that, but under their paradigm situation will be exacerbated. For this reason, we're very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll now let us wait our government to show your case. Within 7 minutes, we can come up with a stage.
In US, 0.2% of banks control 75% of assets in the whole society. Closing option told us as if there's a diversity of banks even in the status quo, but it's not true. As we told you, only tiny part of banks control almost all the assets that exist in the society. We think that actually decreases the diversity of investment because they are controlling how to invest to the certain kind of industries, and it's also making an incentive for those corporations to reckless investment because they are actually suddenly going to be bailed out as closing option has already justified. We think on this occasion, we think those banks are not necessary to exist in a society and that are harmful for society at the end of the day. For that reason, closing government will take this debate. From government debate, I want to talk about two things. First of all, the main argument coming from their side of the house, how the banks are necessary for the as a capacity and trust, in terms of capacity and trust, in order to invest other diverse corporations. And secondly, I want to talk about which side will guarantee better and sustainable investment at the end of the day. So firstly, the capacity and trust. From opening opposition, the two big corporations only have the capacity to invest diverse corporations. But as they admitted their own POI to Prime Minister, total pile of money available for investment won't radically change even outside the house. I admit, when they're broken up, more money will be put as reservation, and that will be a bit lost of total pie. But they already admitted the total pie of investment will not change suddenly even outside the house. They somewhat assume the corporation lend money from one single bank in outside the house. But then it's impossible for outside of the house for corporation to get loans from banks. But it's not true in the first place. Even in the status quo, the big corporations are not stupid to get loans from one single companies. They are getting loans from multiple corporations in order to minimize the risk in the status quo. For example, SoftBank gets loans from Mizuho, Mitsubishi, and several other big banks in the status quo. The small corporations and startup banks are maybe lending money from one small bank, but it's not so important that even in the status quo, those small corporations can still lend money from one bank and the one big bank in the outside of the house. Meaning, even though that is scattered and that is going to be diverse banks, still they are going to get loans from multiple corporations in the outside of the house. That's why financial capacity in one single bank doesn't make any sense in outside of the house. We can still guarantee that it's the minimum capacity for corporation to lend money in the outside. Then they talked about trust. But first of all, they misunderstood the necessity of the trust between the contract between corporations and banks. Banks requires corporation to be trustable because if without that they cannot get return money from that investment. But it's not in the case of the corporation side. Even the corporation don't trust banks, it is not necessary for them to actually get banks because they already get cash. If the banks are going to be bankrupt, they don't have to return money to the bank. It's funny, but it's true, right? That's why trust argument coming from opening opposition doesn't make any sense in outside the house. And even though trust is important, we think the small banks are not trustable always. For example, Hokkaido banks or Shizuoka banks that they are open government talk about are obviously not so untrustable. They're doing the job in the status quo. We think they are already trustable. And even though they are not so trustable, that's why they are going to get loans from multiple banks in outside the house. We think that's not problematic in any way. Then that's why we think in the terms of capacity and trust, we think there's no advantage in the outside of the house to guarantee the capacity and trust as a two big corporation, two big banks. We think in that sense there's no necessity for two big banks to exist in terms of the outside of the house. Then secondly, let's talk about the better investment. First of all, let's talk about sustainability, which is one of the main part of crashes in this debate. From opening opposition, they told us the two big banks are already sensitive because we see a lot of failure in the status quo. That's why they are not going to do again. But when we look at history, we return history, right? For example, after the Great Depression in the early 19th century, actually we had Lehman shock even though we had a history. Even after Zhao went bankrupt, actually Toshiba actually do the same thing. Even though it is not actually 10 years or 12 years, we think it doesn't, it's empirically proven to you how the history cannot be important for those corporations. We told you the unique mechanism from closing government because they are going to be bailed out at the end of the day, even though they fail in the management. They are going to be bailed out, they are not be harmful. Still, the CEO or those board of directors are getting millions of dollars as a compensation after Lehman shock. We think that is a unique mechanism how too big to fail corporations are going to be problematic. From closing opposition, they talked about justification to bail. It's not irrelevant to this debate. When we are talking about there is a too big to fail corporation, too big to fail bank, we are happy to bail out that because it's necessary. Without that, the corporations are going to be failed and it is very harmful for citizens. It's not about that. In order not to bail out the corporation to begin with, we think this debate and this policy should be taken. It's okay to bail out, but it's better if we are not going to bail out at the end of the day. That's why comparison from closing opposition doesn't make any sense in this debate. And even though there's a justification to bail out, if we bail out those corporations, it's a huge loss of economy. For example, we bail out after Lehman shock, it was about $6 billion even single in the US. We think that is significant loss for economy and budget in those countries. We think even though it's justifiable, we shouldn't do that because it's better for economy. So yes.
Okay, so let's be comparative, right? So even we had multiple different small and middle banks, like these banks have the different concern, the strategy, and also they have to take extra sensitive towards the risk they have to take. So how can these multiple a bunch of the bank take a so huge risk?
As we told you, when we talked about two big corporations instead, there's not diverse strategy in that one corporation. For example, we see the subprime loan. When banks identify one single strategy as the most effective way to get profit in that situation, they're going to rush to those, for example, those strategies. For example, we see subprime loan problems. Now, almost all of the corporations and big banks actually taking risk in the subprime loan. From closing the option, they told us what happened in the Lehman shock was not only about, it's not due to the big banks, but actually they are responsible because due to two big corporations, they bought the securities of Lehman shock from those Lehman brothers and sold to the smaller banks and smaller investors in those contexts. Because two big corporations could take a risk to buy those securities. Actually, Lehman shock was actually signified in their side of the house. That's why we think even though they are not totally responsible for those economic crises, they are actually responsible for a lot of problems that happen in society. We told you when we look at the smaller banks, we think it is more diversified because they have to differentiate themselves from other corporations in order to win the competition. Meaning, even though one strategy, a lot of strategy are going to fail in a specific economic context, we think it will minimize the risk of economic crisis at the end of the day. We think because we have diverse strategy among those corporations. We think it's wrong for a tiny part of corporation take the risk and take the one strategy that is going to be economic crisis. We think diversified banks are a bit better for investment and better for development. For that reason, very proud.
Thank you. With no last question, opposition wish to show your case within several minutes. Would you come up to the stage?
Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. This debate is about benefit in non-emergency cases versus risk hedge and necessity to hedge the risk in cases of emergency, right? So we need to justify why we can prioritize the benefit in the non-emergency cases in the very beginning. The only closing opposition told you why it's prioritized in the very beginning, and that's why we are proud to stand at closing up to take the first. I'm going to talk about three things. First of all, what does too big to fail means in the very beginning? And the second of all, I'm going to talk about why risk hedge can't be the reason for you to break up the banks in the very beginning, which is significantly important also from my partner. And third of all, why our argument is better denial against the motion compared with the opening opposition. So first of all, what does the too big to fail means in the very beginning? Four things to say. First of all, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to fail and damage all the citizens in the very beginning, right? My partner clearly told you that probably they were not going to fail in the very beginning because the government is going to give the money to them in order to avoid bankruptcy in the very beginning, or other banks is going to help them by giving the money in order to avoid significant damage, which the opening government said. For example, let's take a look at example Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, because after that United States Congress decided to give the money to the large banks in order to avoid the bankruptcy. Okay, so we say that still we guarantee the sustainability of these big banks, right, on our side of the house. Therefore, secondly, this debate should be about, is it okay for us to use our money or our resources to help these big banks which enjoyed the risky management or money game which is depicted by the closing government, okay? So we say that the CEO told you, right, it's okay for us because that is fundamental part of our society. It's okay for us to use our money to help them. It's okay for us to use our money in order to avoid the bankruptcy of these banks. No, thank you. So second of all, well, actually the opening government is out of the debate because we are not talking about why the bankruptcy is going to damage all the citizens, right? It's not going to happen at all. Okay, so we say that their harm doesn't actually happen. Goodbye, opening government. The second of fourthly, therefore, this is important to rebut this because in the opening half, we don't really see any conclusion in terms of consequences, right? We don't really see which is going to be beneficial, which is going to be harmful to all the citizens, because they are all talking about consequences, just about consequences, right? We say that closing opposition kicked out the opening government, which is not achieved by the opening opposition. So we say that closing opposition is significantly importantly contributing. No, thank you. So, second argument, why risk hedge can't be the reason for you to break up the banks? Well, the government case is something like this, especially the closing government. Well, risky management of the banks, that is going to damage the society. Fourth thing to say, first of all, well, my partner clearly told you, large banks have the incentives to, sustainably manage their own companies, and the social checking system is actually working because they are too big to fail. Okay? So we say that rather they have the incentives to dedicatedly manage their own corporations in the very beginning. But second of all, even if they are risky, but still the small banks are also going to do the risky management, as I told you, right? For example, the reason why Lehman Brothers were managing the extremely risky trade, which is subprime loan, because they don't really see the system of itself, because of the fact that CEO get the money only when they succeeded, and therefore they are going to do the extremely risky management in the small banks. Okay, so we say that actually even the small banks have the incentives to do the extremely risky management on the government bench, right? So even if we concede that small companies even if we concede that large banks have the incentives to do the risky management, still the riskiness itself can't be the reason for you to break up the banks in the very beginning, because it doesn't really make any differences in our side of the house. So thirdly, therefore, debate should be, again, is it okay for us to use our money to help them, right? Fourthly, CEO told you about it. Firstly, it's okay for us because their capacity is necessary for our industry. Their capacity is necessary for our own company, because they are supporting the fundamental industry in the society. For example, if it's United States, these large banks is supporting the Boeing, which is extremely necessary industry for the United States, or like they are supporting the car industries, or they are supporting the exporting industries, all these sort of things. Okay, so we say that we should guarantee their sustainability. And the responses coming from the closing government is something like this. Well, still small banks have the capacity to support them because they have a minimum capacity. They talked about the SoftBank example, right? Because small companies, these SoftBank get the money from the small banks, and therefore they expanded their own territory. So thank you. Two responses. First, well, their response is actually mismatched to our argument, because what we told you is too big to fail banks is supporting the fundamental industry of this society, right? For example, as I told you, these Ford or like car industries or like food industry in the United States can be only supported by too big to fail banks. Okay, their capacity is necessary in the very beginning. Their rebuttals doesn't make any sense to our argument. But second of all, even if their case is true, but their case is still significantly damaging their goal in the very beginning. Because if this capacity of the bank is minimized, that precisely means that you can't get significant amount of the support from the banks in the very beginning, right? It's significantly damaging their goal itself, right? So we say still the breaking up can't be the reason for them to justify the motion in the very beginning. Yes, closing.
How did you
Closing.
Yes, in the status quo, the two big banks are supporting very fundamental industries, but it's status quo. How in outside your house it's not going to be happening?
Well, I've already told you about this, so you don't really see the difference. So let's take a look at third argument. So I'm going to make a response to my third argument because it is included. So compared with the opening opposition. Well, opening opposition told you there is no sustainability of the small banks. Well, that's a nice contribution from closing opening opposition, but there is no conclusion on the opening half still. Well, closing opposition told you like this. First of all, okay, let's assume that small banks are sustainable, as the government said, right? So our argument is confirming or like agreeing the government case, but still we are proving that that is harmful, right? Second of all, because as I told you, as my partner told you, that's rather counterproductive, because collective of the small and sustainable banks rather leads to risky management of these corporations, right? But rather large banks have solid management in the very beginning. And third of all, and also we justify the comparison in the very beginning, which is not done by the opening opposition, right? So on that point, we should be getting above the opening opposition, and that's that's what we are proud to stand for the common law. Thanks.
This opportunity, OCT has been over. お疲れ様でした。